I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
Level with us. Welcome to Level with Us, the show where we play a video game along with our listeners every week. Except this week, we're discussing 3 video games: Slay the Spire, Dicey Dungeons, and Griftlands, all of which are deck-building games.
Which makes this a triple-decker.
So yeah, we're going to talk about each game, and then we're going to give a quick jab for each.
Think of it as a smorgasbord of our thoughts on 3 very excellent indie games.
So let's get started with Slay the Spire. Marcus, what's happening in this game?
So for people maybe not familiar with deck builders, it's where you have a deck of cards and you build it. As you might expect, you collect cards and get rid of old cards to find synergies and just generally fight baddies or whatever the game's about. So in Slay the Spire specifically, you are trying to escape the Spire, a dreary place with tons of monstos and other things.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much story in this one.
Yeah, well, if there is much story, I don't really know.
Yeah, it's mostly about the gameplay. And to me, this game is the pinnacle of take mechanics from like a board game and put it into a video game. And it just works so well. And specifically, I'd say they took the roguelike formula of having random encounters and also adding one card to your deck at the end of each battle. And that in and of itself really created just a really solid, addicting game because you don't know what cards you're going to get, and eventually you'll see ones that really synergize well with your character. Each character feels very different to play. The enemies are the same, but by seeing their intents, you can strategize on what you'll do each turn. You get attack and block. You can also pick up little artifacts that are basically passive powers, and you feel really powerful when you have a bunch of them. It's just really satisfying to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it kind of has the deck building format down. Like, this is the one I've played the most by far of the 3 that we'll be talking about, and I don't have like a ton of experience with deck builders. I don't know if there was another one that was more formative than this one, like one that came before, but I feel like this one is just like solidly about crafting a deck with limited options. Like, that really is the primary pull of this, is getting to see the interesting synergies that you don't at first realize are even possible. I think it's a very well-made deck builder.
They have a lot of really good systems that work together and make it really fun. Mm-hmm, who was your favorite character to play as?
Ooh, I don't really remember their names, but the third one, the one that has orbs around him.
The Defect.
Yeah. I liked him because, and this is a mechanic I sort of saw in Griftlands as well, but you have these orb slots, and whatever you have in your orb slots do passive effects, or you can evoke them or something to do like bigger, better effects. So you can either choose to, like, over the course of the game, make more orb slots, or you can make less, and both of those are, like, viable strategies. I just enjoyed seeing, a lot of damage coming from passive sources that I put in motion.
Yeah, my favorite build with him would be just a bunch of lightning stuff, so that you get the lightning orbs to cycle, dealing a lot of... And then there's a card that lets the lightning hit all enemies at once. And that's just really satisfying to get down. I also really like what they do with powers for him. There's so many cards that the more powers you get, the more stuff happens and stuff like that. He was my favorite as well.
Oh, cool.
Super fun game. Highly recommend it to anyone, especially people who enjoy board games. I think this is something that translates so well into an indie game. And I'm really excited for them to make a physical version of this game, which they've announced, but they haven't done yet. So looking forward to that.
Super exciting.
But before we move on to the next game, let's go ahead and get in a quick jab.
And jab.
Quick jabs is where we talk about just a minor complaint or something that we wish were different about the game. What do you got, Marcus?
I'm not a huge fan of the art style in this game, partially because I've played it a lot. I would not be surprised if you have the same quick jab, Jared.
Uh-huh.
Do you?
Similar, yeah.
Well, yeah, so like I said, this is the one that I've played the most. So at first it was like kind of interesting and kind of endearing, but especially when comparing it to other games with more full animation, I don't know, seeing like certain creatures like wiggle back and forth like the same way over and over again. I don't know. I guess that's an animation theme.
Yeah, the minor animation didn't bug me so much because, the art is kind of secondary to the gameplay. But that being said, I similarly wasn't huge on some of the designs, especially the close-ups. Whenever you stop at a camp, it shows the back of your character's head, and I don't know what it is. I just think it doesn't look very good up close. Not a big deal, but doesn't really detract from the game very much. So, still great.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump into Dicey Dungeons.
Dungeons. Dicey Dungeons, rather than being a deck builder, is a type of dice builder. You are selecting different attacks or weapons where you insert different 6-sided dice to activate them. And all of the characters in this, there are 6 characters that are trying to escape the Dicey Dungeon, I suppose, run by Lady Luck. It's a game show. It's like they're all contestants, and they're trying to escape and win money, and the game is rigged, so they don't escape. So it's very cutesy and very unique.
Once again, I think the story is kind of an aesthetic more than anything, if that makes sense. I think the story isn't as important as the game itself, but it is pretty cute I don't know, some of the character interactions are pretty silly and fun.
Right, I was going to say, I love that at the beginning of each run, there's a little bit of banter between Lady Luck and the different characters. I think that really gave it more personality, gave it more character for me, which I really enjoyed.
And like you said, even though it's not a deck builder by conventional standards, it uses a lot of the similar elements, just like Slay the Spire, going, floor by floor, facing enemies, or choosing a different route to get to the end. And I think the biggest strength of this game is the variety. There are 6 characters you can play as. Each one plays completely differently, even though they share similar mechanics. And for each character, they each have 6 episodes, which imposes different rules and ways that also completely change the way you play, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the variety is a real strong suit of this game. And it also feels very arcadey to me. So, like, I feel like they could have gotten away with less or fewer of these different options or different challenges. But the fact that there are so many different variations, I think, is really cool. It gives it a lot of replayability.
Yeah. The game revolves around rolling a set of dice and then applying those dice to different attacks. And because people know, we just intuitively know how dice works, how probability works with dice, it's really easy to grasp and understand when you're lucky, when you're unlucky, how the attacks work, as well as the enemies' attacks, because the enemies use dice rolls as well.
Oh, a little side note. This is probably my favorite game, board or video or otherwise. My favorite way a game has utilized D6s. Like you were saying, this uses the D6s in a way that like people can easily conceptualize. Oh, I know how likely it is that I'm going to roll a 6 right now. It's a 1 in 6 chance. And, I don't know, just the familiarity with it. I like it.
And with that dice theme, besides the fact that the characters are actual dice...
yes, did we mention that?
No.
You play as dice.
Yeah, maybe I should have added that at the beginning. Also, just like the status effects deal with dice as well. Freezing a dice will set the largest value that you rolled to a 1. And hiding a dice's value is a status effect as well, because if you put it on an attack, some attacks vary depending on the value you put in them, so you're not sure, you're taking a risk there. So I like the consistency with the theme. Anything else you want to talk about before we get into our quick jabs?
No, I think that this is a solid experience. I think that anyone who likes this format of game, I think this is a lot of fun.
But not good enough that we can't add a quick jab in.
Jab.
So if I had to come up with a quick jab for this, it would be that there's not quite enough synergies within the attacks themselves. So each character often will have unique attacks and abilities and mechanics that will only apply to them, which is really cool. but I never felt like there was enough variety in the attacks themselves for me to come up with an interesting strategy. So for example, there's a couple attacks that cause poison, but I never felt like I could make a poison build, if that makes sense. I never felt like I could stack poison and let that be my win condition for a battle. I could have an attack that causes a little bit of poison, but that would be it. And, I had an affinity for the ice attacks because for a lot of enemies, having low value numbers really disables them. But apart from having one or two ice attacks, they don't coincide. I was mostly just going after attacks that did the most damage or seemed the most debilitating, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas, and not that I'm trying to compare it to Slay the Spire, but I felt like in Slay the Spire, you're always going after cards that fit your strategy, that you feel fit your deck.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. I think that is kind of just a limitation of what they chose to do, with rolling dice. I don't know. I can't think of a better way for them to have done that, but at the same time, I agree with you. There isn't much of that exciting synergy, sense of discovery as you put two attacks together.
Right. And like I said, it doesn't matter in the long run because overall a run is fairly short and there's a lot of variety in each one. I just think it would have been cool if within those runs, if there was a way to, strategize what pickups you choose.
Yeah, for mine, I actually have kind of a pretty ethereal, non-specific one, which is just, this was the game I enjoyed the least out of the three. Not to say I didn't enjoy it, just I didn't enjoy it quite as much as Slay the Spire and Griftlands. I think that this is mostly just because, honestly, I think it's probably because of the same quick jab as yours. The other games had more of an aspect of me being in class and daydreaming and be like, next run, for Slay the Spire, it's like, next run, I'm going to do all shivs. I'm going to just burn through anything that isn't shivs and just do a lot of shivs. Or for Griftlands, I would daydream and be like, I want to try to kill everybody. But for this one, it was, it was a diversion, but it was not really something that, I don't know. It's a game that I played while listening to a podcast or something. It wasn't something that engaged me enough that I didn't want to multitask while doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Well, if you do muscle your way through and actually get to the ending of this game, because there is an ending and a final boss fight if you've completed all of the episodes. The boss is incredible. It's really, really fun.
Okay, that might be enough for me to revisit it and see if I can get through to that.
Well, the final game we have to talk about today is Griftlands, which I believe came out this year. It's been in early access before that, but yeah, Marcus, tell us what Griftlands is all about.
It's got a pretty in-depth world, so I'm actually going to go to the official site and see what they think this game is all about. The Steam page says, Griftlands is a deck-building roguelike where you fight and negotiate your way through a broken-down sci-fi world. Every decision is important, be it the jobs you take, the friends you make, or the cards you collect. Death comes quickly, but each play offers new situations and strategies to explore. Wow, I need to do the Steam page for all of these. That was much more succinct than anything I've ever said. Yeah, this one is the one I'm most excited to hear what you thought, because we both have just started playing this recently, so I want to know if this was a yeah or a meh.
This one, and I've started off each of our conversations today by saying, the story kind of takes a backseat to the gameplay. I feel the opposite about this one. To me, the gameplay is definitely unique and interesting, but I couldn't really skip through the dialogue just to get to the next battle. You actually have to pay attention to what's going on in the story a bit. Or at least the story is kind of what's driving the narrative. For each run, you could say, oh, I'm going to do a run with this character and do this, but what they're saying isn't irrelevant. But anyway, all that to say, the story is pretty heavy, and there's a lot of text, and I think with that comes a little less accessibility. The other games, I think, are more pick-up-and-play experiences. Certainly there's some learning you have to do, but you can really grasp it pretty quickly. Griftlands, I did not feel that way. It took me a little while before I felt like I actually had a handle on how the systems worked. Sure. In fact, there's 2 card-based systems in the game, so to speak. There's the negotiation, I believe is what it's called, and then there's battle. And there's just enough different about both of them to make them feel like unique experiences. And I actually kind of preferred the negotiation system once I started to understand how it worked. What about you?
You know, that I think was my absolute favorite thing about this game, was the fact that it wasn't a black and white decision between, oh, battle is better or negotiation is better, or, oh, this is a pacifist run or a, genocide run. I really liked the way Griftlands handled decisions and morality. Like that description I read that said every decision matters. It doesn't matter in the sense of oh, you only get this ending if you don't kill people, but more like there were occasionally times where I kind of chose a different decision than I thought that I would. I would start playing it, be like, I'm feeling like I'm going to try to do negotiation a lot. But there's a cost there, and it's not just the cost of not seeing what happens in battle or, finding a different plot direction. You can run out of the ability to negotiate, and then you're in a situation where you cannot negotiate with someone and you have to attack them.
Right.
So I love that. I love that there were occasionally situations where it's you can bribe them, you can negotiate with them, you can negotiate with them to do something else, you can come back and find someone to fight with you, or you can just fight them. And then when you fight them, you can spare them, or you can kill them. And what's interesting about that is it's also not just I don't know, it's not lip service. It's if you kill them, there's a high probability there's someone else in the world who hates you now because you killed their friend. But if you leave them, then you're leaving a dangerous piece on the board, and you might have to come back and talk to them again or whatever. So all of that to say, I guess I really liked how there weren't correct answers. There were just trade-offs.
There's a lot of systems, like you just mentioned. There's the not a morality mechanic necessarily, but there is reputation. If you have a reputation for being violent, there are, like you said, character relationships. They'll either dislike, hate, or love you, which can grant buffs or banes. There's there's consequence for consuming an item that restores your resolve, which you use in negotiation, but it's usually done by having a drink, and then a tipsy card gets added to your deck. There's a lot to balance and juggle, and like you said, there's a lot of decisions throughout each run.
You could probably give and take some of the complexity of this game, especially if you were looking for more of a quick and breezy roguelike deck builder. But I think as far as treating it as an RPG, I wish that more quote-unquote your decision matters type games were more like this, where there were times where did something out of character, or I felt like I was put in a specific hole, but I could have done another thing. It would just have made it more difficult for me. For example, there's a guy that you can break out of prison, and you can fight all the prison guards to break him out, but that's a really, really bad idea because there are 5 prison guards. So you can do things guns blazing, or you can think. There was a time where I was forging a document, and the person's okay, what should I put here? My dearest Admiralty, I look forward to seeing, and then it's your face, your countenance, your butt. And I was all right, your butt. And then the second thing, of course, another option is please keep in mind that these things are of the utmost blank. It's blank, blank, your butt. And then the character's I'm not sure you're taking this seriously. And then the third one, of course, it's please, yours as ever, your butt. And I was this is stupid. I'm going to lose the game because I did this. But then when I delivered the document, the guy is Herm, what's this about my butt? And then it says negotiation, but it's a little bit harder. It says +10. Admiralty doesn't talk that much about butts. I just liked that it had to explain that. I didn't say +10, inaccurate forgery, or +10 he doesn't like you. It was yeah, they don't talk about that as much as you did.
The writing in this game in particular seems pretty well thought out. I do think they They gave a lot of thought. Like I said, I feel like that was the primary objective, was fleshing out a world, making different factions, making different religions.
Yeah, there's a whole lot going on. So I think at times it's easy to miss kind of like the moment-to-moment wit or humor, because there's just a lot to parse through. There's just a lot of story and a whole lot of characters. So,
all right, well, it's time for our final quick jab then.
And jab.
My quick jab is actually just that I kind of wish I could play this with a mouse and keyboard, which is not something I almost ever say. I am a console gamer at heart. But some things just, to me, just didn't translate well. Like moving the cursor around the screen didn't feel super intuitive, especially when you're trying to highlight a tiny little status effect underneath your character. And then also sometimes when you press A, that confirms something, but at other times you have to press X to confirm something. I don't know, there's just a few things where I'm like, yeah, you know what, if I could hover over things with a mouse, I bet I'd enjoy this more. But yeah, that's my quick jab.
Leave some quick jabs for the rest of us. You covered a lot of things that I thought about mentioning, like the sheer volume of keywords. I thought that there was just a smidge too many. And I mean, it's not like you can't use keywords or shouldn't use unique mechanics, but maybe they were just appealing to that hardcore audience that wanted every character to feel super unique, because with each of the 3 characters, you probably have 6 to 10 completely unique keywords, because they have to have them for both negotiation and battle. So there occasionally it was I was like, all right, I don't know if, dominance means that you're going to do damage at the end of the turn or add damage to every attack. I don't know if this is more negotiation. So it was just a lot of words that don't immediately click in my head. But that's not my quick jab either. I just wanted to voice that. My main quick jab was actually also, I didn't feel like this was optimized for Switch quite as well as it could have been. For the reasons you mentioned. Also, the cards cover up health bars. It's kind of crowded onto the screen during battle, so you can't see certain things. Yeah, and just a little bit of that weird button mapping too. So,
well, next time we record a podcast, I'll try and think of something really weird and outlandish for my quick jab.
I'll do the same thing.
And then we'll still share our quick jab.
Yeah. Just sort of as a final thought, now that we've talked about all 3 of them, I do think it does them a bit of a disservice to compare them, but then again, I did that, I have been comparing them throughout the entire thing. All 3 of them have a very distinct identity, and all 3 of them are well made and enjoyable in their own right. So I think that us expressing kind of the things we liked and didn't like about them probably gives a good vibe for anyone who hasn't tried all of these, which ones they might like.
They absolutely stand on their own. To reiterate, Slay the Spire to me is the definitive deck builder type game. Dicey Dungeons to me is taking dice and taking just massive amounts of variety so that every single time you play it feels totally different. And then Griftlands melds interesting and unique RPG systems in a deck building type way, coupled with a very well thought out story, which is something that I bet a lot of people are looking for in their games. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this quick triple-decker episode this week. Next week, Marcus and I will be talking about one of our favorite games of all time, A Short Hike.
A short hike, I love A Short Hike.
And we highly recommend you check it out. You can wait till next episode to hear what we think if you'd like, but it's so cheap. Just go buy it and play it, and let us know what you think of it by reaching us at levelwithuspodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet at us at levelwithus. That's at LVL with us on Twitter. But until then, I'm Jared.
I'm Marcus.
And we'll level with you next time. we're gonna end it here with a little more less.
A little more less.
We've had some less segments, but yeah, whatever.
Fewer.
We've had more less segments.
Fewer. The word is fewer.
We had fewer segments this week.
There we go. Do you know the difference between fewer and less?
No.
Well, let's leave our audience with a new segment replacing rabbit holes for this week, Marcus's Grammar Corner. People think that less and fewer are interchangeable, but not so. Less is used when the thing you are talking about is not quantifiable. For example, milk. I have less milk in my cup than Jared. I don't have fewer milk, but fewer cookies. I have fewer cookies than Jared.
I don't know. I feel like less cookies still makes sense.
Fewer is generally what you should use if you're talking about something that's quantifiable. Like, Jared has fewer friends than I. Jared has... I don't know why that came off the top of my head. That was
fewer
weird.
charisma than I. Oh, wait, that's wrong. Less charisma.
There you go. You're catching on.
But, Marcus, what if you're saying I have 2 liters of milk and Jared has 1 liter of milk? You can't say I have less milk?
Yeah. Liters are quantifiable. You're right.
Oh, so you're saying I could only say it if it was less liters of milk.
If I had fewer drops of milk than you, that's totally okay. But, like, milk as a amorphous thing is not quantifiable.
Interesting.
Like, there's less sand on that beach. You wouldn't say there's fewer sand unless you're saying there are fewer grains of sand.
So what do I have less of than you, Marcus? Good looks, charm.
Less musical prowess. You know, because that's not quantifiable.
Okay.